when we did some sort of, at times we see as many as 60 people there collecting on a nice afternoon when it's low tide, and each of these people is allowed at the present time to collect 150 cockles per day per person. And so you can imagine, if you've got 60 people and they're there on continuing days, how many shellfish are being collected. A couple of years ago, one of us, we commissioned some students to look at the densities of shellfish in these areas, and it looks like in the last few years there has been a decrease in the shellfish in those areas where people are collecting. So we would probably ask that the Environment Canterbury sort of becomes a bit involved in this. I know it's Ministry of Primary Industries that does the fisheries regulations, but Environment Canterbury is involved with the habitats in the estuary, and so we're hoping that maybe you can be involved with that. So we're really encouraged by some of the issues in your plan. That's to stop the decline in our habitats and ecosystems, and we think that the issue that we've raised is going to be part of that. So I think that can we see if Bill is still available? Sure. I think that's the end of our presentation, but we're both happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. Bill, were you there and did you have anything to add?
No, I just caught the last part of Isla's talk, so that's good. No, nothing more to add.
Thank you. I can see Councillor Pauling has a question for you.
Hi, kia ora korua. Thanks so much for your presentation. It's great to hear from the Untitled Trust. I just had a question about the shellfish gathering, and in particular, what were some of the things that you thought ECAN could help with in terms of that?
Can I answer that, Bill?
Yeah.
So I think that because so I think that ECAN might be able to help in terms of monitoring some of the environmental sort of status of those shellfish beds. We have a plan to maybe do a community survey, which will look at how many shellfish are there. But this kind of study would always be helped by understanding, say, what the sediment conditions are like, or the environmental conditions. A community initiatives like measuring how many shellfish can be done by people. But if there's monitoring, sort of which includes the sediment or any contaminants in there, that sort of thing, that really assists in understanding the whole ecosystem.
Yes, just to add to that too, kia ora, Craig. I think it's important that Environment Canterbury realise that this issue is out there, and I'd just urge you as councillors to keep an eye, come together as a council.
Great, thanks very much for that, Bill. Is there anyone else that had any further questions? Nobody's put any in the chat. So it's just, if no one's got any further questions, I'm just waiting to see if any have come through on the chat. Otherwise, Bill, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for being with us with the technology. It's a new way of working for us all, and it can be quite challenging with lots of people on and lots of different connections and the likes. So thank you very much, and really appreciate you to take the time to put in a submission and speak to us today.
Thank you, and we'll be sure to be able to answer any queries you might have.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Hey, good night.
Megan, it's Louise. I just want to check to see Tony. We've had a few problems with getting Tony into the meeting, and he has joined the meeting, and I just want to confirm that he can hear us and that we can hear him.
Great. Tony, are you there?
Okay, it's not working still. Plan B, I will ring him and we'll try and do it over the telephone. So,
Right. Try to do that. Now, I can see a few others have joined us. So just, I'll turn my camera on as well. I think we have Annabelle. I can see Tony online, but he's not able to hear us or speak back to us. So we'll wait and see if Louise can get Tony on the phone. We're having some issues with some of the technology this morning to those who have just joined us recently. So we're running a little behind time as we try and write some of that and try and keep to schedule. So a team from the trust, the Avon Heathcote Trust, go in front of him. So we'll see if we can get Tony on to give his presentation. And then from there, we'll move to the Apawaho Heathcote group. So that's you, Annabelle. We'll just wait and see a few more seconds if Louise can get him online.
Kia ora, Megan, it's Craig here. I just think it's worth reminding everybody that's online that the reason we don't have our cameras on, a lot of us, is because it makes the connection really patchy. So it's not because we don't want you to see us or we don't want to see you. It's just something that we've discovered on the online forum that's better. So yeah, sometimes if you are breaking up or you think it's not a great connection, then just turn your camera off.
Thanks for that, Craig. Thanks for clarifying that for everyone, as we've got people jumping on all the time.
sorry, councillors, I'm just waiting for Tony to ring me. Okay. So, and then I'll see if it works.
Thank you, Louise.
It'll be nice when we're all back in the office, won't it? In the same room.
It sure will be. I will have learned new skills.
Right, here's. Hi, Tony, it's Louise. Okay, we're going to try and make this work. So I'm going to put you up to the microphone on my headset and see if you, so could you say, it's going to work. Okay, now Tony, could you say something? Can you hear me? Good. The meeting, can you hear?
I can hear you, Louise, but I can't hear Tony.
Have you put him on loudspeaker, Louise, on your phone?
So speaker on my phone. No, my microphone is not muted. Tony, sorry, I'm just trying to make how best for your phone call to be heard by my councillors, because I'm using a headset and I just have to put your phone up to my headset. So if you could say something nice and loud. It doesn't. Okay, can people hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Louise.
There.
We can't hear Tony, though, if he's speaking.
You can't hear Tony, but you can hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me. Okay. Tony, are you still there? Okay. Okay, I'll put you right up to my machine to see if that works.
No, we're not getting anything there, Louise. Have you got Tony on speakerphone on your phone?
Yeah, that's the only way it's going to work, I think, Megan and Louise, is if you put them on speaker.
You'd need to put them on speakerphone and then have it close by to the microphone.
Louise, do you want to get him to ring me and I can do it through my phone and put it up to my headset?
Okay, you to ring my team leader, Taryn. Okay, Taryn, your number.
It should be on your phone. Can you text it to Tony? And just text it to Tony and get Tony to ring my phone, and then I'll hook my phone up to my laptop.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Tony.
Please bear with us for a little bit. I think the schools are back and the bandwidth is struggling as well. Just be patient, a couple of minutes.
Okay, Tony, I will get Taryn's number for you to ring Taryn. Megan, we could almost go to our 9:30 if Annabelle's online to save holding everybody up while we get Tony. Okay, right.
Yes, thank you. I think we'll do that. Annabelle, are you online now?
Yes, Morena. Yes, I am.
Morena, nice to hear from you. Thank you for your patience and for listening to us battle with the technology. Now we've got you down for 15 minutes, so feel free to get started. And thank you very much for speaking to us. I know there's some people who are wanting to hear what you have to say. So if you want to get started, you can give a bit of a presentation, and then we can ask some questions afterwards.
I have a PowerPoint. Shall I undo my camera and share that? Is that the best way to do that?
Yes, I think so.
Yes. Sorry, I'm just. Oh, I can't find it. I know Louise has it loaded on her. Oh, here, hold on. Here we go. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Councillors, you were able to see it on the chat. I would have loaded it onto the chat where the documents are kept if you want to, if it doesn't work.
Sorry, I'm just trying to load it onto my oh gosh. It's on my desktop and I'm just trying to, I don't know whether.
Hi, Annabelle. And oh no, that looks positive. There we go. Well done.
I can't see it myself.
Thank you, Nicole. I was just about to say where's the button.
So I can't see anything on my screen.
That's not good.
But it's okay. I'll go to. So.
Are you happy with that, Annabelle? Are you happy to work that way?
Well, just let me know if it's not going through. So I'll see if it's working.
Right.
Let me know. Okay, Morena. So I'm Annabelle, Chair of the Opawaho Heathcote River Network. So thank you. You're doing a sterling job at keeping this going in these hard times of technology and information from the community. So my submission today is really a summary of my written submission, and just to really highlight and emphasise the points from the Opawaho Heathcote River Network. So we are a community group, a catchment group, and our vision is an ecologically healthy river and with a community connected to it. And as you all know, the Opawaho Heathcote River is probably one of the most degraded urban rivers in Christchurch, and it's in more ways than one. And so our vision of our group is to have a collaborative network with community groups along the river that works to improve the regeneration of the Opawaho Heathcote River. And the way in which we work is really, this diagram describes that, and it's really essentially about partnerships, relationships and linkages between the governance level of decision makers such as the City Council, ECAN, Ngāi Tahu and the Zone Committee, and then all the doers along the ground, all the passionate community groups that live in the area and have a connection to the river. So I really want to emphasise us as a catchment group. So if we're looking at freshwater management, I want to emphasise that we are a catchment group. In last year's annual plan, ECAN very kindly supported us financially in the development of a catchment infographic, which is shown here. And this looks at the whole catchment and then the river and on its length and divides it up into ecological zones. So I'll come back to that. Now, I suppose our emphasis is really that we want programs that are focusing on urban waterways. The Land and Water Regional Plan is going to have standards requiring that. The large population lives in Christchurch, and so we need more focus on restoration of our urban waterways. And in that, the Opawa Heathcote needs to be identified as a priority river and a priority catchment for action. One of the ways that we're seeking input from ECAN is to help facilitate a process of a catchment management plan, which pulls together all the parties and agencies and communities that are involved in water management and in our catchment, and pulls together all those issues and developing a process for community involvement in that. And some of the key issues in our catchment are, as everyone is aware, sediment, stormwater, and community involvement and engagement. And here again is the infographic. So if we go to one of the issues of sediment, that's probably the most urgent issue in the Opawa Heathcote is a huge amount of overland flow from the Port Hills and from our roads and construction that flows into the river. And the slide here talks about the from EOS ecology report that gives a summary of the Cashmere stream and the issues of sediment into the river, into that stream, which then flows into the Opawa Heathcote River. And in that report, it really highlights that even when there's no rain, the Cashmere stream has very poor water quality in relating to sediment, and after a rainfall event, it is extremely poor. So this is what's flowing. This is just one of the tributaries that flows into the Opawa Heathcote. I also really want to emphasise that there needs to be, to help control these things, there needs to be more funding and ensuring that there is enough funding to for monitoring and compliance of enforcement of sediment discharges from developers and landowners. There needs to be funding. There's a great initiative of the Erosion and Sediment Control Toolbox, but it needs to be more funding to make sure that industry and developers are trained to be able to use this resource and understand in their practices what's needed. And of course, the overriding issue is revegetation, with a focus on revegetation in the Port Hills and especially in the gully areas to help combat this issue. And really like to thank that there's been a great initiative that's come out of the Zone Committee with the Stormwater and the Cashmere Stream and Port Hills Working Group, which we as the Opawa Heathcote are involved in. And that's a great thing as a community group to be involved in those larger projects. And here is a slide which depicts this issue, and you can very clearly see this is after a beautiful sunny day, after a large rainfall event in the area, and here's the sediment-laden water coming in from Cashmere Stream at the confluence, and then to the right, the Opawa Heathcote River coming in, which is a relatively good quality at that point, and then from then on, the quality turbidity reduces due to the huge sediment load. Yeah, another important issue is stormwater, which you have highlighted in your annual plan as a focus for this. And there's a real potential to be working with river care community groups to be helping develop this behaviour change needed for the residents and communities to help improve the stormwater going into our waterways. And one of the mechanisms that has been proposed and put forward is the Community Water Partnership. And I really urge ECAN to support this and to sign this as a way of pulling every information sharing, pulling programs together that can then be put out to the community, like a collaborative way of making effective programs easy to implement. The next issue that I want to talk about is zone and regional delivery. And as the Paua Heathcote River Network, we support the Zone Committee as leading this community process, and see what really needs to be developed is an understanding of what's significant and unique in each zone, and setting priorities for that, and in the Christchurch West Mountain Zone. And then there's a real opportunity through this process as well for these targets to be identified, and then to identify community groups that ECAN and the Zone Committee can work with to actually progress these things. Because often as a community group, you're trying to come up with ideas, but if you can work with someone and know that what you're doing is aligning with priorities that are set, it'd be a big help. And we also, another issue is in the document, there's a lot of talk about community, but I think that there needs to be a recognition of the river care community groups as having very closely and actively working in the area of community relating to the river, and they have a huge base of knowledge and issues and ideas, and a huge passion which could be drawn on. One of the key issues is biodiversity and biosecurity, and the Paua Heathcote is a site of ecological significance under the city plan, and weed management, and under the Canterbury Regional Pest Management Plan, the weeds that are in the Paua Heathcote are not identified, but they are a threat to the loss of biodiversity. And it's really important that in weed management, we look at the Paua Heathcote River as a system from its source to the sea, because if something is eradicated, we have to understand that the weeds are carried downstream, and if something is eradicated downstream, you have to be actually doing things upstream. So it's all a connected system. So we're seeking that ECAN work with City Council to develop a weed management plan for the Paua Heathcote River, and that. Yeah, so rather than these weeds treating them when they are too big a problem, actually taking a precautionary principle now and saying, getting on top of and identifying what the issues and how we're going to manage this area in this urban corridor. And so to that, we want to support ECAN to support the development of an ecological corridor along the river. And another area that we're looking at is wanting to develop as a group, working with other agencies, a biodiversity strategy for the Paua Heathcote River. And here is a slide which shows 3 or 4 of the common weeds: the yellow flag iris on the left, hanging sedge, and in the actual waterway is sweet canary grass and reed canary grass. And these are the significant weeds that are of an issue in the catchment. And then regional leadership, we support this, and especially support the reporting of Mātauranga Māori alongside the state of environmental reporting, because and we would like to see that happening in the Paua Heathcote River. We support the continual support of community groups and information sharing, and the involvement of youth engagement and the Enviro Schools programs for environmental education. And so thank you for your opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. That's been a really great presentation, and I think you've been really clear around what you're seeking from us and what some of the issues are for the Aotearoa. We've got a number of questions here from councillors, starting with Councillor Pauling, and then Councillor Farm, Southworth, and then Jenny Huey. So Craig, do you want to kick off with your question for Annabelle?
All right, kia ora. Tēnā koe, Annabelle. Thanks so much for your presentation this morning. Just want to acknowledge the work that you and the Trust do. Being a member of several community trusts, I know what it's like to work behind the scenes and try to get things off the ground in the environmental space. So yeah, well done and keep it up. I had a question in particular about some of the solutions that you see for the sediment issue, and in particular I know that we would all like more funding. That's the big thing. But I'm interested in what would be the number one thing you would do with that funding in terms of the sediment issue.
Oh, it's a hard question, isn't it?
Sorry.
Well, I think the working group, the Zone Committee working group, we have identified a number of priorities of things to do with that, in that program, and it's a combination of, I suppose the idea is getting all the landowners and all the agencies together to understand what the problem is and to see it as a priority. So that's probably the number one, and that's facilitating a process which pulls everyone together. Everyone takes it on board as a priority, and then the actions come out of that. And so one of those is communication, one of them is revegetation, one of them is compliance and monitoring. So it's an integrated web. So it's hard to say what the one thing is because they're all linked.
Kia ora, Annabelle. That's you answered really well. I was looking for that you were going to contact the landowners, because I think you mentioned gullies, and I thought that the landowners of those gullies are pretty important to get involved in contact. So yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Farr? No?
Thanks, Megan. Hey, thanks for your presentation, Annabelle, and again, echoing Craig's praise for the network's work. You guys do a great job. My question was around, I guess, the amount of potential community involvement that the Opawa Heathcote River Network might be involved in, because, I'm looking at particularly the Christchurch Stormwater Management Plan, and then you mentioned the Community Water Partnership, and then in the coming years, ECAN looking towards our regional plan chapter for Christchurch West Mountain and the community involvement that will ask for, I guess, of the community. Does the network see a way or any possibility that these kind of joint processes, which are all linked and have the same issues, could actually be one process? Or do you have any thoughts about whether that would be valuable if we could figure that out?
Yeah, hi Lan, thank you for your question. Yeah, I think like all these sort of big advocacy planning issues are on our radar of things that we want to be involved in, and that we have been involved in to date in the first process of that. And as our organisation, I think it's an issue of capacity as of an organisation, and I think we definitely, those are the things, that's where the biggest impact can happen in a group. It's a balance between the big advocacy projects and the on the ground projects of the doers. And so as a group, yes, we want to be involved in those, and it's about developing our capacity as an organisation to ensure that we are sustainable, that we're not continually fighting for every little dollar to, you're spending all our time, as all community groups do, for just to be sustainable, to get funding. So if we can get some security of funding and support to be involved in those processes, to ensure that the continued involvement in them and upskilling and bringing people in, then I think very much so. We would want to be involved in it, but that's going to need support from agencies such as the City Council, ECAN, that want us involved to actually enable that process to happen.
Cool, thanks Annabelle.
Vicky?
Here we go. Hi Annabelle, and thanks, that was really interesting. And what I wondered if you could just sort of comment a bit more on how the zone committee works with Christchurch. And I noticed early in the piece you talked about the size of the population of Christchurch, and obviously, all these groups and the zone committee, they're relative to the size of population, it's a small pools of people. And I'm just wondering, how do you think we could work better to engage with a wider part of the community and really try and tackle that sort of scale of the issue?
I think the key thing is identifying what each zone is about, what is really distinctive about the Christchurch West Mountain zone that people can relate to, that they understand it's part of their backyard and the issues in their community. So if we can tell that story really well and people can understand that, and then they can see from that story and the understanding the landscape and the context in which they're living and going about their daily activities and recreating, and then we can say, well, this is what's here, and then these are the things, these are this out of that, and this is what's unique about this zone compared to another zone, and what out of that we can create priorities for action, which and then you can work with all the community groups that are operating, and you can sort of help steer programs towards that. But there's a real balancing act in between communities wanting to be things being driven from the community and someone you know, saying, well, this is sort of what you should be doing. So there's a real balance in that as well.
So thanks, Annabelle.
Thanks very much. We've got 2 more questions, but I'm just looking at the time. Jenny and Phil, happy for you to do your questions, but if we can try and keep them as brief as possible, that'd be great.
Thank you, Megan. Good morning, Annabelle. It's fantastic, all the work you've been doing. And like others said, thank you for coming to our hearings. I've been privileged enough to have an overview of the work on the Heathcote since 2007, when I worked very closely with the community board down there. It's really depressing for me because it all seems to have got worse. And there seems to be millions of things going on. And I've just got a similar question to all the others, except I want to know what one thing you think as the river care groups could be done, given that there are going to be employment opportunities coming out of COVID-19. What one employment thing, creation scheme do you think we could help with labour that might be able to assist the river care group with its work on the Heathcote?
Thank you. I think it's probably 2 things. I'll put 2 things into one. Probably the one is the management of weeds along the river, and so a program relating to that, the eradication of weeds, and then also tied in with that is the revegetation of the river corridor, so planting and working with community groups, and yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Annabelle, it's Phil here now, Annabelle. I've just got a couple of questions. In relation to the erosion coming from the developments above the stream, the Cashmere stream, it just seems to me that as long as as those developments keep creeping up the hill, that sedimentation problem is going to continue. So I'm just wondering, in your view, is there actually some reason, or good reason perhaps, for the district plan to be changed so that in fact that development is further limited?
Yes, definitely. I've walked, as part of my COVID-19 bubble, part of my recreation has been to walk up in that area, and it's quite horrifying that all this development that is happening on these hill slopes of the Port Hills, and especially in that Cashmere stream area, that is contributing hugely to the whole erosion and sediment flowing into the river. So they're very unstable sites, and yes, I think.
Thanks, Annabelle. That's a helpful comment, and I'm happy to follow up on that too. Just a couple of further quick questions. One is, you referred to the need for funding for the monitoring and compliance and enforcement part, and my understanding would be that the consent will be subject to sufficient compliance. Are you really saying that in fact the current monitoring and compliance and enforcement is not actually sufficient?
Well, I'm saying it needs to be funded, yes, at a level that it is sufficient that we can actually get on top of that program. So yes, it needs to be more funding to ensure that the compliance and monitoring can be carried out to a level that helps the problem.
Thank you, Annabelle, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. As the others have said, it's been a really valuable presentation, and we really appreciate you giving us that feedback.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and have a good day.
I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
Okay, and how do I leave the meeting?
So if you just press the little red call button, little hang up button
Okay.
on the bottom of that bar there, and you should be able to leave.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Megan, it's Louise. I think we'll just check with Taryn to see how he's going getting
Thank you.
Tony on the line. Taryn,
And
how's it going?
Welcome to Tyrone as well.
I have emailed Tony. I'm just waiting with my cell phone number, so I'm just waiting for him to call me. Once he calls me, I'll interject into the meeting if that's okay, Megan, and let you know that he's online. So I'm just waiting for him to call.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we could take Tyrone next, if that's all right.
Yes.
Tyrone Fields has joined the meeting. Tyrone, can you hear us? Not a good sign. Hello, Tyrone.
No. Tyrone, are you there? Let's have a look and see.
He has joined the meeting. I'll just check that he's still there.
Still on mute.
Councillor Hands, I now have Tony online. I'll just see
if
I
Tony,
can.
sorry.
Is it okay if we proceed?
Yes, I think that's a good idea. We'll get Tony going if we can, since he's been waiting patiently and bearing with us with the technology.
Let's
Thank
see
you,
if this
Taryn.
works. Morning, Tony. Are you able to speak, please? Just say
okay,
something.
yep, testing 1, 2, 3.
Wonderful. It sounds like you're on the wireless there, Tony. So if you want to launch in, and Taryn can keep holding his phone to the microphone, and if you want to launch into your presentation for us, that would be great.
Sorry, I'm going to translate, Tony. Tony, if you just present your information to the council, please.
Yep, I'm Tony Razis, and I'm a hospital scientist working for DHB on cancer genetics and all kinds of genetic disease disorders, trying to get genetic diagnosis and doing research on cancer and other things. Yep, so can people hear me? Or?
Yep, everything's fine, Tony. Please carry on.
Oh, right, so carry on with the submission.
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, right, okay. So can you get the PowerPoint on the screen, or?
I'll just check. Louise, do you have the PowerPoint, the
Yes,
presentation?
I'll just share my screen.
Tony, I'm just getting Louise to put it up on the screen. She's just going to share a screen with the councillors. Please hold the line. Perhaps you'd like to continue. We are running a little bit tight for time. If you'd like to start talking whilst Louise does that.
Yeah, okay. So my main focus is climate change and, of course, giving back to nature as being part of our response. We've been told it needs to be a World War II type concerted effort. And I believe that nature, we have to give something back to nature as part of that response, because our relationship at the moment is like a friend that you never see them until they want something from you, and basically when they invite themselves to your house, they help themselves to your stuff, and then perhaps trash the place, and all the while never giving anything back. That's our relationship with nature at the moment, and that needs to change because it's unsustainable. And basically, I've pointed out in the presentation there that some of the things that we contribute to nature, which is landfill waste, greenhouse gas emissions, amongst other things, deforestation, habitat destruction, all those sorts of things. So if you've taken nothing else from this meeting, giving back to nature is what I consider a high priority issue. And I also point out there that if it'd be nice to get soft plastic recycling, make that a priority issue, given that it's highly prevalent in the North Island. So just a wee bit that we should be learning a bit from SARS-CoV-2, that if you want to deal with the problem, you need to listen to the scientists. That's the first thing. We need to be aware that capitalism is not going to help us solve climate change, and some of the most loud, vociferous people who talk about, like, for example, who are climate change deniers and all that kind of stuff. The right-wing conservatives, for example, in the USA, they are also advocating people go back to work and take hydroxychloroquine.
Just click on the actual, click on the slide and it will move every time you click.
Same nutters that are telling us that we shouldn't be doing anything about climate change.
Sorry, can I interrupt, Tony, and just check that the councillors can see your
we haven't
PowerPoint?
started on our climate change response yet.
We can.
We're already
Thank you.
well beyond what is sustainable. You know, people have been saying 350 parts per million is what we should be aiming for, and we're just not doing anything. So the next thing is my personal World War II response to climate change. And there's been a lot, and I'm not going to go into any detail about what I've been doing. Basically, you know, converting my car to electric and buying land and converting and restoring it back to in terms of native restoration. I'm not going to go into any detail about that. There's stuff on the presentation if people want to look at it. But what I do want to say, just one point, is my motivation for doing it is not because I want to make money out of it. It's because it's the right thing to do, and I gain a lot, you know, spiritually, intellectually, from what I've been doing by connecting with other people who are experts in the field, learning a lot from them, and becoming an expert in a lot of areas that I was just had no knowledge of before. So. And it's developing, it's that kind of reward which is not financial, which is perhaps we should be placing more emphasis on. And I've got a few slides there about my car, which I've converted. And I just want to finish off with there's a summary of the issues that I'm facing with property that I've bought in North Canterbury, and basically want to restore it, semblance with native trees such as totoras, carnagas, and the main issues I'm facing is that the area is probably drier than it's ever been, that I've experienced in the last 8 years. We've had such a very harsh summer in terms of virtually no significant rainfall, and so it's becoming harder to try and establish forests, and that's a global trend. It's not just local. And so I've come up with, I talk about various ideas about how to get around that, and that is basically what's required are nursing plants, and there are various options there. Some of them are not so desirable, but pines and gorse are fairly robust species, and to grow things like totara you need rapid shade and potentially an ability to store carbon, and you need to protect the soils from degradation. And so I've got some slides about some pockets of biodiversity out on the land which I've identified, tiny pockets, and just so that you're aware, the neighbouring properties have all poisoned theirs out. There's some of the plants that I've identified are over 100 years old, and there are skinks on the property as well. And so just finishing off here, in terms of managing the grasses and things and the weeds, which is basically what the land consists of mostly, they are actually serving a useful purpose in terms of protecting the soil, slowing water evaporation, and letting the grass grow long, making it awkward for cats who are looking to feed on skinks. And one of the things that I'm having to face is angry neighbours who don't actually like what I'm actually doing, have come out and attacked me, not physically, just saying that they don't approve of what I'm doing. They don't like the fact that I'm leaving the grass grow long. They want beef cattle to roam around on it to keep the grass down, which they're happy to do free of charge. They're also arguing that my native restoration goals are not suited to the area, and they've asked me if I want to sell the property, which I'm not prepared to do. So that's the sort of thing that I'm having to deal with at the moment, having spent a lot of money and put a lot of work and effort into trying to do this native restoration. I'm having to deal with neighbours who don't actually approve of what I'm doing. And this is where I'd like ECAN or the government to say, look, just a letter of support would be nice. And I'm not actually interested in getting any money for what I'm doing, because even though I can apply from 1 billion trees, for some financial support, it's not of much use to me. I'd actually much rather just have a letter of support so they don't have to deal with angry neighbours. And I'll just, the slide, second to last slide, it shows the neighbouring property. I'll just finish here. It's the neighbouring property after a herd of beef cattle have just stomped around and had a feed for about 2 weeks, and you can see that the land is quite stony and bare. And after a harsh nor'wester and a hot day, a lot of the topsoil will just go to dust. So if our goal is to build soil carbon stocks, then that's the opposite thing of what we should be aiming to do, which is what I'm trying to do, is protect soils so that they do actually grow things such as natives. And I'll just, lastly, there's some acknowledgements on the last slide. So that's basically my submission. Hopefully I haven't gone over time.
Thank you very much, Tony. I'm not sure if Tony can hear me, Taryn, or whether you're relaying for us.
I'll relay.
There are a couple of questions here. I see we also have Mayor Gordon online, just so that he's aware that we are running behind time, and Tyrone as well.
Perfect. We just have a couple of questions, Tony, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I'll read them out.
Gary, can you read them? Thank you.
Yep. First one's from Councillor Southworth. What would Tony see as ways ECAN can encourage people to care for the environment as he does?
I think just send the message out there that that's what, because basically people don't listen to people like me. They listen to people with some authority. So even if you just put a message out saying, look, this is what we want to encourage, people would have to listen. And this is why, and just explain why this is what we have to do. So that's my message to ECAN. Just the sentiment coming from ECAN that this is what we need to be doing would be fantastic. I don't think anyone's actually getting that message from anywhere.
Great, thank you. The second question I have is for Councillor Mackenzie. You mentioned that your neighbours see restoration of the land and soil as a waste. I've also encountered the same dynamic between organic and conventional farmers in South Canterbury. What do you think ECAN can do to better support people like yourself and restore the land?
A letter of support. That's all I want. Nothing else. I don't want money. I don't want anything else. A letter of support. That's all I want. And if it's, because if it's coming from somebody like ECAN, somebody relatively authoritative, then these guys have got nothing to hit me with. It's just that they think the world is run by economics, and therefore economics justifies everything. They don't actually see the bigger picture. So that's a good question, and I'm pleased that somebody asked me. But yeah, that's really all I'm after is a letter of support. But everything that I'm doing there has a reason to it. I'm not, because they see the land and they think, I'm just neglecting it, but it's just prepping it up because I've got quite a lot of seedlings ready to go, but they're not going to survive unless I get the environment ready for them to survive. So I've got over 200 toteras so far, and I've got access to hundreds and hundreds more, if not thousands. But yeah, as I say, they won't survive unless they're going to get some sort of rapid shade in the area.
Thank you, Tony. Is there any other questions?
Thank you. I think Craig had indicated that he had one, but I just wanted to see whether or not he does. Just popped in the chat.
Yeah, I was just writing it up. Is it easier to do that or just say it?
You can just say it quickly, Craig, and then I can respond. Tony, there's one more question.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I was just wondering if Tony was aware of our plans for a regional tree planting and regeneration program that we mentioned in the forward of the annual plan, and I'm just assuming that he would support this, and wondering and asking he could utilise this as support for what he's doing. So just wanted to know if he was aware of that.
Hold on, I'll just ask. Tony, are you aware of the annual plan? Part of the annual plan, there is information with regards to tree planting. Are you aware of this? And
no, I haven't had time to look into all that, but I'm happy to look into it if people recommend it. But it's not just having an annual plan that people can look at. It's actually finding ways to educate and penetrate into the minds of people, because I don't think many people have time to look at the annual plan. But but I'm sure it's got good things in it, and I will look at it.
Taryn, you could let Tony know that, so we are looking at that going forward, and that we do support a lot of other ecological planting efforts as well.
Media or whatever.
Great, thank you, Craig. We are.
I think we're going to need to wind up there, Taryn. Are you able to, Tony? I'm not sure if Tony can hear. Just in the interest of time, I know, and thank you very much, Tony, for persevering with us this morning and doing this with the phone. And it's been really valuable to be able to still have him give his submission. But I think in the interest of time, we do need to move on because we're quite behind time at the moment. So if you could just, Taryn, if you could just thank Tony very much for his submission. And I don't think there's any further questions for him, but certainly like to encourage him with his continued restoration works. Thanks, Taryn. Right, so Tyrone has been waiting very patiently. He did leave a message on the chat saying that he couldn't continue with his submission if he was beyond 10:30. So if we're able to have him come online now and give us a quick presentation, is that okay, Louise? Is Tyrone here?
Or if it helps, if it suits Tyrone, we could reschedule Tyrone for later this morning. Would that work better? Just
if you could work, yeah, Tony, if you could either give us a message, Tyrone, or speak up on here and let us know what will work better around rescheduling.
We could do, Tyrone, would it help? We could do 11:30. I know you're not available this afternoon, but we could do 11:30. Would that help? Would that be all right with you?
Haven't got any response from Tyrone at the moment. He may have jumped off.
Well, okay, yes, he. Oh,
hold on. I'll just have a look and see whether I can see him on here.
Yes. Well, shall we move on to Waimakariri District Council? And while you're doing that, I'll contact Tyrone about another time.
Thank you, Louise. I know he's been waiting really patiently. So if
yes, he did offer another time.
If he's offered another time. He said he can't do past 10:30 in his previous message. So I just can't see whether he's still online. It doesn't appear he's replying to us.
No. Okay, I'll get back to him and see if we can sort something out, or even.
Thank you.
I
mean, it is showing that he's still on here, but Tyrone, you're not.
No, I think Megan will press on with Waimakariri District, and I'll click on my mute and I'll contact Tyrone and we'll see if I can make another time that suits him.
Okay, thank you. Mia Dan, are you there to give your submission? From on behalf of Waimakariri District, apologies for the lateness. We're having some issues this morning, but we're getting there.
Yes, yeah.
It's okay. Yes, I can. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Dan. Jenny here. We can hear you.
Hi, Jenny. Would you like me to start?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, look, I'd like to thank Council for the opportunity to make a submission today, and I'm joined also by Council's Policy Manager, Mr. Jeff Meadows, I hope.
Yes, I'm
Jeff.
here, Dan.
Hello, Jeff.
Hello.
Just from the outset, I'd like to say that we enjoy an excellent relationship with ECAN, and I particularly enjoy a very strong working relationship with you, Chair Jenny, and also you all as councillors as we interact in various council-related committees, and I speak for my colleagues in that acknowledgement as well. I'd like to pay particular acknowledgement to your outgoing CEO, Bill Bayfield. Bill, you've been have been outstanding in your leadership, and our council has enjoyed working with you over the years. We congratulate you on your new role and look forward to working with you in your new capacity. From the outset, I want to say that there is strong support from our council to the direction that your council has signalled in your annual plan. I want to highlight the key points from our submission, noting that since you put your draft out for comment, quite a bit has changed. Briefly, the key points are, as you are no doubt aware, our ratepayers will have difficulty absorbing a proposed average rate increase of 9.8%, noting our district's rate increase will be less than 4% that we consulted on. We would support you substantially reducing the proposed rate impact on our district. Waimakariri remains fully committed to the Greater Christchurch Partnership and supports plans for managing our collective land use and transportation challenges. In respect of passenger transport, urban public passenger transport services charges for the Waimakariri are proposed to increase this year by $57 for urban residents, of which the express park and ride service is about $30 of this and was consulted on with the community. This is a very significant increase for our residents, and we've estimated that at around 73%. And we are disappointed this further increase was not consulted on at the time, especially in that the consultation for Park and Ride was held in the latter part of last year in November from memory. Post-COVID-19, there is uncertainty about the ability to implement the total package of Northern Corridor works and associated PT solutions in a short time frame, along with the challenges of ratepayers funding additional costs via rates, and the likely reduction, at least in the short term, of demand for public transport. Waimakariri District Council is proposing to stage the development of park and ride facilities in the district to help manage COVID-related issues and the rating impact. We suggest that ECAN delay the implementation of express bus service until the 1st of July 2021. This would allow the COVID-19 related impacts to be assessed and worked through and defer the increase in rates. As the implementation is planned leading up to July 2021, demand could then be better assessed, and if needed, services can be phased in to help manage the rates impact. That may require a further round of consultation. Just speaking briefly to the balance of our submission, it would be helpful if there was greater clarity around funding allocated to zipper implementation from the freshwater management, biodiversity, and regional planning portfolios. We support allocations ECAN has made in respect to biosecurity and biodiversity. We commend the Regional Council's leadership in the development of climate change risk assessment. We support applying the PM 2.5 measurement to replace PM 10, although as we have commented previously, we believe the NES for air quality should be amended to measure winter averages rather than daily exceedances. We support regional planning expenditure to process changes to the Land and Water Regional Plan and respond to the NPS for Freshwater Management 2019. At this point, I'll leave it there, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I did make some points around Park and Ride which differ from our submission that we put in. I will ask our staff to send a copy of my written statement to you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Dan. I'm not sure if you caught at the start that I'm chairing on behalf of Jenny. It's Megan here this morning. We've got a few questions come through. First one is from Councillor Clearwater.
Yes.
Kia ora, Dan, and thank you for your submission. Dan, I'm just in relation to transport, like linked with climate change. Earlier on, you in your full submission, you kindly note that the Canterbury leadership around climate change has been exemplary. I'm just concerned, Dan, that if in fact we don't, as a region, we don't pursue public transport, that in fact the whole address a climate change emergency thing goes on hold. So I'm just hoping that there's a way forward that in fact that the delayed investment in our transport infrastructure, that there is a way of catching up with that well before, as you're suggesting, 2021 July.
Thank you, Councillor Clearwater, for your question. Look, I think a whole lot of things have changed with COVID-19. All we're saying is we're not wanting to show leadership in that space. We're just saying just delay it by a year, and let's see where the charges get to as well, because a $57 increase, frankly, 73% takes a lot of convincing of people. I went out and was very happy to sell the PT recommended changes at around $30, and I got a fair amount of flack with that. But 57, it's a large increase. We're not stopping on our side either. We're getting on and putting together the land that will support this. So I'm not saying that we're not doing our bit. All we're saying is the view we're getting back from our ratepayers is we've got to make some savings. We think delaying it by 12 months in the scheme of things will still show that leadership, but just recognise people's ability to pay at this time. And it's very hard for people, and we're going through our budgets line by line to find where we can find savings. And it's hard, and I appreciate that it's hard from a leadership perspective as well. I'm not saying that our council is not committed to this, because it still remains committed. We're just saying we feel it should be just delayed.
Thanks, Dan. And just for explanation as to where I was coming from, clearly we would see, many of our councillors would see that unfortunately because of a previous underinvestment in transport infrastructure, including cutting of routes, that in fact it's sort of how we get there in the future. But look, thank you for your comments, Dan.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. The next question is from Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, Elizabeth.
So my question is around the your comment about the air quality measurements. I would like to know what the statistical basis is for you wanting an average rather than the daily exceedances.
Thank you. And I might actually get Jeff to jump in here, because I must say this is not an area of expertise for me. So, Jeff, if you could possibly proffer an answer.
Sure. Just in response to the previous Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment had recommended that it goes to winter averages rather than daily exceedances. And it's the fact that the NES for air quality at the moment still has a requirement to go to daily exceedances. It's a response to the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment's recommendation.
Okay, all right. I might just investigate that a bit further. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
Councillor Southworth has a question as well.
Thank you, Morena, Dan. I was just interested, when you talk to your ratepayers and talking about a $57 or the $30 rise, and when we're talking around about $1 a week, is there an understanding, or do they perceive the reduction in congestion as essentially being like a saving, that there's a saving in time? I mean, this park and ride is intended to reduce the congestion, which I've seen is pretty awful coming in from North Christchurch, from the north of Christchurch. So is that understanding, that connection, well understood?
Look, I think, well, as much as we get the opportunity to have a direct conversation with any of our ratepayers, it's always a difficult one, and I've fielded a number of strong calls, certainly around this issue of people not as committed in this space as perhaps we are. And we recognise that from our space, we needed to show some leadership there to reduce congestion, and that's why we were prepared, and we're prepared to invest in the order of 4 or 5 million of our own in terms of land and other things that we've got to do to get park and ride ready. When I was this pre-earthquakes, we were set to launch park and ride at this time. I think with the advent of the Northern Corridor, the express buses will certainly add to that and are an important component. But 50, look, to be honest, I don't want to, well, I want to label the point that when we went out to consult with our community, and it was an extensive consultation, I praised ECAN for the consultation at the time, we were indicating $30, not $57. And so a lot of people will not be happy to hear this change, and are certainly not happy from the feedback I've got. And if my council is a reflection of that, they certainly gave me a fairly strong message yesterday about it, that level of cost needs to be investigated and reduced. If we want people to do it, yes, everyone, I think accepts that there's a change needing to occur to reduce congestion, to do the right thing. But we've just got to make sure that that cost doesn't get out of the realm of affordability for people. There are a lot of people that won't use that won't use the park and ride service. However, the service, once I think that the express bus gets in place, I think a lot of people will start to use it, and I hope that it will be successful. But at the moment, in the climate of everything that's going on, delaying it for 12 months, we're not likely to see the Northern Corridor up and running, well, we hope by the end of the year. Delaying it by a further 6 months, really, in that timetable, isn't a great hardship in the scheme of people in making that change.
Yeah, thanks for that. And it is, I don't know the history as to why it's jumped, essentially doubled from what was consulted on, and that is unfortunate. If there was good and extensive consultation to then have a rise at double, that I don't know what the history of that is. I'd be interested to find out more. Thanks for that, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. That's very good feedback for us. There's just one final question from councillors for you, which is from Councillor Edge.
Morning, Mayor Dan. My question is related to the zipper work and your comment, or council's comment, about trying to understand the funding relationships between those various portfolios. I know it is a little bit vague, and I get the impression that a bit more clarity is wanted by council. Not only what we're doing within those budgets in terms of project delivery, but also dollar per project. Does the council certainly with its land and water subcommittee seems to be also wanting to make sure that there's a better synergy between what council's doing and the zone committee. Is that something that you see improving over time if we can get a handle on the relationships between various funding initiatives from both organisations?
Yeah, totally agree. You've hit the nail on the head there, Councillor Edge, and thank you for your understanding. And also, can I just acknowledge that your leadership in that space over the years too, certainly appreciated that. From our council's perspective, we've committed quite significantly to this. We've put in place last budget round over 300,000 additional spend to make a significant investment in this area, including new staff to work alongside our community to make that change. What we're asking for is just greater clarity around ECAN's contribution. I know it's a great deal of frustration for one of my council colleagues, and I've previously raised that with your CE, just so we're all clear about what the contributions are and what our roles are. If we can be clear about that, then the community's clear. We're all winning.
Okay, thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much, Medan, and thank you so much for your answers to the questions. I think they've been really useful for us as we move forward into some of our discussions and some good food for thought. So thank you for your time, and thank you for bearing with us with the technology and with the delays. I'm sure we're all still getting used to using this kind of technology for things like hearing. So I just want to extend thanks from us and hope that all is well in the Waimakariri in the next few weeks as well.
Thanks, Megan. Appreciate that.
Yes,
Thank you.
It's Jenny here, Mayor Dan. Thank you very much. That was excellent.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We appreciated the opportunity to make a submission. Go well.
Thank you. Cheerio.
See you later.
She has some support, Di Lucas and Stefan, and I think all three are in the meeting.
They do appear to all be in the meeting according to my computer. So.
And Diana has also, there's a Word document that I've popped into the chat that may assist.
Yeah, I've got that. Hey there, Diana, do you want to start for us? Thank you very much for waiting. You've been really patient, and we've just had some issues with the technology this morning. So if you could get started and introduce yourselves and get cracking on, that would be awesome.
Certainly, and thank you indeed. I'm also having issues with technology. I may dip out on occasion because my servers seem to fail me, and also my connection, but I'll come back in. I just wonder now how long I actually have.
It's Louise here, Diana. 10 minutes and then 5 minutes for the councillors to ask questions is our...
And how much for Di Lucas and Stefan?
That's for the whole, all of you?
10 minutes only?
Yes.
I understood. All right. In that case, I've written a document and put it on chat, and actually I'd rather give my whole time over to Di Lucas. I have 4 things that I put in my submission. I have amplified these within my written submission, which evidently is appended on chat. I have general support for the annual plan. I'd like to see some of the principles and intentions of the annual plan embedded in the long-term plan. I see a need for increased monitoring and indeed for enforcement. And I cite the case of Barforce Resources. And I think I was quite shocked when I read that case and quite ashamed. I would like the implications of plan changes to the RMA on the responsibility of local authorities to be considered in imbuing all the activities of the Regional Council with a clear focus on mitigation as well as adaptation to climate change. And this should be anticipated because it's very near to be brought through in Parliament. And Di Lucas is going to speak with Stefan on this further. I also have some concerns about the implications of the COVID-19 lockdown on this annual plan, and I have just presented some useful information, perhaps. I'd like you to consider it as that in my written submission, or notes which I've put through on chat. So I'd like to now turn over to Di Lucas and Stefan so that they can present what I think is a very important approach in FEP's farming environment plans, which provide an opportunity, as many activities of the Regional Council, in actually working for biodiversity and working for implementation of mitigation as well as adaptation measures in terms of climate change, while maintaining farm prosperity. And I'm very keen that you see the very unique and very effective approach that she has developed. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Diana. So Stephen and Di?
Kia ora, Di. Nice to
Kia ora.
Thank you, and thanks, Diana, for inviting us. We've looked at the annual plan and the chapter on climate change and its hazards, risks and resilience, and we're very concerned that it doesn't address mitigation. And we have been involved for more than a year on doing farm plans that with farmers to show them how they can address greenhouse gases, and it's been very enthusiastically received. So we think that it's time to get ECAN to support this initiative, because the climate change chapter should go further. So Steph, have you got?
Yeah, I do. One.
So we've got some screens we'll put up to run through. So we are saying that ECAN, through the processes they already have of FEPs and so on, they could support farmers in their need to understand the way they're going to have to transition towards carbon zero. And the FEP provides an opportunity to do that, and ECAN can assist through making that tool more GHG responsible. So Steph's put up there. So we're saying we need to go from the monocultures of the moment, which is the predominance in Canterbury and Aotearoa widely, to a mosaic that shows how we can mitigate and sink some carbon to address the greenhouse gas emissions. If we think about Canterbury, the major emissions are from agriculture, so it's irresponsible to not help farmers address those, we think, when there's a tool available. Next, Steph. Can you move it on?
Yep, has that moved on? Sorry, the
No, well, not on mine, no.
Just having a couple of tech issues, but it seems to be. Is that working to slide 2 now?
It's not. It's not.
Okay, I'll just.
I can see it says slide 2. Is that right? Yeah.
All right. We didn't have slide 1. So.
Sorry about the technical issues with that. I'm just reopening it now. I'll be 1 second.
Yes.
Apologies for that.
So we've worked for this last more than a year on, we've done farm planning for decades, but in this last year or so, we've included greenhouse gas components in that. And the primary sector agreement states that by 2025, 70% of farmers will have agreed that they will be managing greenhouse gas in accordance with their FEPs. Now, at the moment, there's no way that can be done. The FEP tools are inadequate to lead them in that direction. Right, the next one now, Steph.
Working?
Now let's go into, yes, that's working. So into 4. Yeah, 4. Right, so at the moment, the Steph will explain slide 4 about how GHG are currently being modelled in farm planning.
So in farm planning, the principal tool I'm sure you would have largely heard about is Overseer. One of the key tools is Overseer FM. So this diagram here, really as simply as we can put it, interprets and shows what the modelling involved in Overseer does. And the critical things that you need to see here is that it's the step 1 part is the classification of the farm into blocks, and then integrates land characteristics of that block and then management practices, and produces a GHG output, including other nutrient cycles. And it's important to note that 7 different types of blocks that that's the limit of input into Overseer. And then I've just moved across to slide 5. Di, can you confirm?
Yes,
you can see
yes,
that?
it's good.
Excellent. So this is a summary of what we call the FEP. What is the FEP process? So this is based on the model by Beef and Lamb. And these different steps are what's involved in creating FEP. And you'll note those arrows on the right-hand side are which we currently rely in the FEP process to tie into Overseer to produce our greenhouse gas as a gauge of how we're dealing with that element. And so our current FEP system is essentially a landscape analysis tool at the start, but then it moves into that reliance on Overseer. I'll move on to the next slide and pass it back over to Di.
So we're saying instead, from our case study work, we'd say you need to take a landscape approach, because the way it's happening, things are very isolated and inadequate, and the limitation on the blocks scenario means that everything's disconnected. And so we're saying you need to take a landscape approach, and just as the fishing game submitter was saying, we need to recognise the landscape and the biodiversity and the heritage of a landscape and the whole catchment system and the farm within that. And the current tools do not allow you to do that. The next one, Steph.
Yeah. So just a summary. So this is how our IFP approach works. You'll notice it's quite similar in structure to the FEP process. It's a little.
IFP is an integrated farm plan.
Yes, thank you, Di. So this integrated farm plan goes through a little more thorough process of analysis, and you'll notice here this extra element of defining the landscape context is quite thorough. And the second big point of difference is that GHG is calculated within the model so that you don't simplify the understanding of the landscape, which is really critical. As you move down into those bottom components, the bottom steps, so step 8 and 9, which is actually all about design and planning. And so that's what a FEP is supposed to be, is it's about plans and not maps. So that's the critical, what we're trying to facilitate here. And going back to that landscape context, we start at the big scale, and I'll pass that back over to Di to talk about starting at the big scale.
So in Canterbury, it's good we have land typing. It's been done for the whole region, and the types of country geomorphologically and ecologically. We have a system that goes from broad landscape types to land types, and then you can apply that. It's modelled, it's described, and you can apply it down at the farm scale as landform components. The ECAN has that system on their GIS, but it is not public, and that we consider needs to change. Here's one clip of a landform component from the land typing, and then applied at the farm scale on that little 40 hectare block there. So that's the landform components mapped out into the farm scale. And that's a really useful way to approach the farm and the diversity within the farm and the diversity of the farm within the landscape. Next, Steve.
Yep.
So applying that one there, we did an integrated farm plan for that 40 hectare block of beef and lamb, and showed what the current emissions were from the whole system, and went through to a plan, not a map of what is, a plan for the future. And it showed there, you can see in those options, going from the current situation, which generates 269 tonnes of CO2, to through to that plan we just showed, which is down to carbon neutral, just with 2 tonnes. And then we've also done an alternative version with the plant-based scenario, which gives them to a carbon positive. So it becomes a useful sink rather than a source. Okay, thanks, Steph. Next. We've also done dairy farm planning and on the Canterbury Plains. And in this example with this 1,200 cow dairy farm, we're able to show how you can work through insetting, planting on the farm, insetting, not farming it off to somewhere else with offsetting, but insetting on the farm. So by insetting some in the unproductive land on the farm, on this intensive dairy farm, 1,200 cows, we're able to inset enough plantings to reduce emissions by 26%, which, you know, I think is pretty impressive. But that's not enough for our 2030 goal. So what we did is the next step is to put cows into shelters where you can collect their pee and poo and put that through to a biodigester to generate energy, which runs the milking shed and various things. But then when doing that, we're able to get the emissions right down to 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions through this transition. And so it's phenomenal. But, you know, farmers, no one has any idea what they need to do. So you need to get out there and help them in their farm plans, because the farm plans for these places are very, very unhelpful, the ones they're getting at the moment that ECAN signs off. The next one. So we're, Steph might like to speak to this one. I've talked enough.
Yeah, sure. So summing up where we've been successfully doing specific IFPs for farms, and we're looking at that 2025 target of growing FEPs throughout New Zealand, and we want to see how we can do IFPs at a bigger scale and share this, so scale it up for the 2025. And so we're looking and working on a few different aspects of this at the moment. So we're doing a GIS-based IFP tool, which essentially brings in those base layers to really facilitate a landscape understanding. So it's mapping at that stage, so we're facilitating that. And then we're also building into it this GHG calculation tool. So that's based on land management units. And so you can manipulate your plan with different typologies, different types of treatment of the landscape, whether it's change or management, and understand the impacts of those changes, and then move that through and create plans with that. So it's about a planning tool, and we're working on a GIS-based version of that, which is shareable and that people can pick up and use. That's why we're calling it a DIY tool. So alongside that, we're working on a design guideline, which is essentially an assemblage of principles for designing farms and for integrating different types of land uses, land managements that can manage GHG. And that's where it's also got built into it, this IFP toolkit, which is different technologies, developments and methods of managing GHG. And they come together to work on what we're calling the DIY tool, which is where people can start planning themselves and building in these, because there's just simply not the scope to be able to expand these, and for teams like ourselves, landscape architects and consultants, to actually create IFPs for the amount of people needing them. The fourth part of this is also the completion of land typing and making that publicly available so that we can inform this type of landscape approach.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you very much for that. So I think you've got a little, how much more have you got to go there, Steph? We just have a few questions and just conscious of time as well. And winding it into annual plan and Diana's original submission. So if you want to just start to wrap up.
That's
Yes,
on the
this is
last slide there.
This is our final slide. So that's a three core requests to get the recognition that farm plans could embrace planning for GHG, because it's crazy to get people to plant waterways with calyxes and flax that give no sequestration is just crazy. And so you need to encourage them to recognise multi-dimensions and not the single purpose stuff at the moment. To make the land typing as an information base, make that accessible, and support for us for development of the tool. We think Canterbury is a good place to set this pilot up. So we're developing the tool as to be a nationwide tool to help people. We're in a crisis situation. We need to be able to plan better for addressing GHG. So we would like to do a pilot that would be Canterbury based. And so we'd appreciate, and it would be good to get financial support to do that tool, to help that get underway.
Thanks very much, Di. There's a couple of questions here, but there's also some discussion on the chat around your presentation being useful, and it might be useful to see it in another format other than annual plan conversation. So we can continue that discussion if councillors want to later on. We've just got two other quick questions here. Vicky and Phil, can I just ask you,
Hi, Jen.
Sorry, and Jenny. Jenny, do you want to ask yours first? And I think, and if Vicky and Phil can write in the chat whether or not they're specific to the annual plan or whether they're more generally around what's been presented to us, and we could address them in another format. So Jenny, if you go ahead with your question, and if Vicky and Phil could say whether or not there are questions particular to annual plan or whether they're...
Okay, well, mine is specific to the annual plan, in my opinion. And so mine is, I'd like to know, have you submitted your landscape concept to the current overseer evaluation? And if so, if not, why not? And what was the response?
No, Jenny, we haven't submitted it to the current overseer review. No, we haven't. We've presented, we've got it into, we presented recently at Massey at a technical conference. I think some ECAN staff were there, and we'll provide a paper to you of that, which explains what we're doing. But no, we didn't put it into the overseer review.
Oh, well, thank you, Di. I think we'll follow up with what Megan just suggested, and we'll get you in for one of our briefings. Thanks very much for coming along, and thanks, Diana.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you. And I hope that councillors will read my notes, what I wanted to speak to. Thank you.
And yes, we'll send in a draft paper so you can circulate that with councillors and staff.
Thanks, Di. My question, I'll try and be brief. Thank you for very much for your presentation, and I would also like to hear further more about what you've presented at another time. But my question relates to: are you really saying that, in effect, and that agriculture can really make a big reduction to our carbon emissions?
Yes.
Yeah, and also I just wondered if you, in terms of the farm management plan comments you made, if you were agreeing with the earlier Fish and Game's comments that in fact farm management plans should really include the use of superphosphates.
They should address those. Can I say about fertilisers, what's been really interesting, like that dairy farm plan I referred to, we implement that plan, there will be no more fertiliser brought on site. That plan does away with any imports of fertiliser or feed. And so that's why we need to get a more holistic approach to these things. Yes, the fert imports need to be recognised.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much for that. We've run out of time, unfortunately.
Sorry, I had a question, Megan. I got jumped out on the question, and it's a very quick one and relevant, I think.
Very quickly, 20 seconds.
the land typing that you mentioned, the issue around public availability, is that to do with funding and something that Environment Canterbury could therefore fund to put onto their Canterbury Maps website, or is it to do with the legal, legal situation?
There's no legal situation. I originally contracted Landcare Research to do it for us in 1993, and it was my property. And then ECAN, when we're doing the regional landscape study, and then when the landscape study was reviewed in 2009, it was made into GIS files, and ECAN has insisted on holding those privately. There's nothing from the suppliers that requires that. It's purely been an ECAN decision, which I think is wrong.
Okay, that's lovely. Thanks for that.
Thank you very much for your time, Diane. That's been really useful, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
Annette, are you still online? Well, Louise, have we still got Annette?
Megan, hi. No, Annette's struggling with her internet, and I've gone back to her and suggested this afternoon might be better. So, but no, we haven't been able to get Annette, but I think Colin's on the line.
Yes, okay. So
we could take Colin's submission now.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Colin.
Right, so ready to go. Okay, this very much neatly follows on from the previous submission of Diana and Di's. Kia ora koutou. I'm here to sort of really look at a much bigger sort of picture than just the annual plan, obviously, a bit like the previous discussion, and note that the present pandemic is just one of multiple emergencies that are descending on the planet and on New Zealand. And, you know, there's been massive talk about huge hits on the kind of global economy in the sort of vicinity of, 30+%. And so the pandemic is really just a harbinger of other emergencies that are going to develop, like the climate and biodiversity, of course, which is my own special concern. And in this, of course, we're now hearing the rhetoric about downsizing government. But in fact, we need to upsize it and upsize the public service and increase capacity. As the dog said to the grumpy cat, you're all about small government until you get stuck in a tree. So the only way to do this when you've got a zero rates rise or even a reducing rates level, which we may need to implement, which you may need to implement, is of course to start bringing salaries down to what is sustainable. And this honestly, as I say in my written submission, could involve, slashing top salaries down by 50 or even more %. I know you'll all love that idea. Anyway, what we need is more green work to compensate and to mop up all of the lost luxury jobs that are being lost in the conventional economy. And your staff can be a major component of helping organise and manage a lot of green work that needs to be done biosecurity and in protecting and managing and enhancing our biodiversity. Some of the details I put in my written submission, so I don't need to go over those again. An incredibly important kind of aspect to this is the compensation for lost expectations of endless material consumption is generating, after dealing with the basic needs of humanity, the physical needs, having a sense of place, a sense of history and identity, and this needs to be built on our natural and cultural heritage. And in order to do this, as Di has just pointed out, we need a much stronger green infrastructure and integration of green and regenerative agriculture into our landscape. And this, in due course, I believe, rather than promoting the idea of elitist tourism, we need not to reduce people's ability to enjoy the planet, but to have green, low impact tourism. But this depends on having in New Zealand a truly clean green landscape, not one that is being stripped through industrial agriculture and unregenerative practices. Our nature needs to be visible. I mean, that is what is special and unique to our place and what gives our identity. Okay, so I don't need to go into the details of how to manage biosecurity and biodiversity. We need more resources in those things because Canterbury is one of the lowland Canterbury has got one of the worst records in terms of loss of those of biodiversity values. I guess my main proposition in this presentation really goes to some of the final points that I made in my written submission. I'm presently on the Regional Council's Biosecurity Advisory Group, but what we need now is a Futures Advisory Group. And this should be done in conjunction with the City Council and other councils, universities, iwi. And it's not about telling people that we're going to turn out the lights, but rather to have a rescue plan for all emergencies as and when required. I've been involved with developing a program at the WEA on creative transitions to sustainable futures. It's all about anticipating the trajectories that we're on and doing something about planning for a quite different and restructured sort of future compared to business as usual. There's almost a stampede of ideas about these sort of appearing in the media now about about regenerative agriculture, regenerative living, circular donut economies, and so on. We've all heard about these things, and we just sort of put them aside. But now is the time when we need to incorporate these into our mainstream thinking. And so I guess I'm sort of promoting that the Regional Council will set up with the city and with other interested parties some kind of futures advisory group which can think outside the square, which can look at really doing and investigating and dreaming up transitional states to a sustainable future that are bite-sized and digestible, not, as I say, just turning out the lights. Part of this is about equity, about inclusiveness. We just had Anzac, never forgetting the terrible slaughter that happens when nations and ethnic groups, and we've had the mosque shootings a year ago. We've got to continually address the dangers of setting groups up against each other and scapegoating groups, especially when times get tough, and that's the most dangerous time. So we live in a perilous time. We're at a crossroads. We need to act now. People are wanting solutions and a vision. Look at the newsletters to the newspaper this morning. Now's the time to start taking steps towards that kind of future. So that's probably about what I was basically going to say. I even had some slides here which we're going to show an infrastructure plan for the country, having optimized green patches through the landscape, a bit like Te Ara Kakariki does, and which I know Regional Council has supported in the past. And here's one about an eco-sanctuary for Christchurch. Canterbury is the only region in the country that doesn't have such an eco-sanctuary to show off our charismatic, iconic wildlife. And all behind me, I think there's what Canterbury used to look like, was sort of forest through the landscape, from the mountains to the plains. Anyway, enough from me. I look forward to a larger discussion about these very deep and extensive issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin, and thank you for your time and thank you for your patience as we've battled with time delays and technology this morning. Were there any questions? I haven't got any indicated here. Just one from Councillor Southworth for you.
Thank you. Thanks, Colin. Hi. I was interested in that last bit that you just showed with your stepping stones and the map with different scales of biodiversity patches. And this is just a question that I've been thinking about. We have a lot of focus on riparian planting and sort of lots of long, narrow corridors of biodiversity. And Di in the last presentation talked about the absence of carbon trapping in to some extent in those plantings, depending on how they're done. And I wondered, do you have a sense of what's most critical in terms of, pursuing a focus on the riparian planting, or whether it might be better to focus on these larger patches of biodiversity? I ask you that because I know you're an expert on the ecology side of things.
Yeah, well, I think there's the graphic you're looking about, and that's derived from I'll hold it there a bit longer, and that's derived from a research paper that was written back in 2006 by myself and Graham Hall, which using empirical data on the dispersal of native forest species and incorporating the need to have solid patches of forest habitat and wetland habitat for that matter, that protect the more sensitive species that need more protection and have a significant buffering effect around them. And also the stepping stones are optimized in terms of their spacing to allow for birds to go from one patch to another and drop seeds and so on as they go. So all of that's been sort of worked out. There's a conventional sort of model that's been adopted in the past by parts of the City Council, but also by the Auckland Council, as a framework for optimising landscape structure, if you like. And the Te Ara Kakariki project has utilised that concept as well. So they've got these green dots, sort of about 100 now, scattered through the Selwyn district, but that concept could well be sort of rolled out, across the whole of Canterbury, really, as a means of getting, hopefully, kakariki down from the mountains, stepping across the plains, right out to the lake and the seashore. So yes, the empirical backing exists for optimized patch size. The bigger, the more buffer, the bigger the core sanctuary area in between, and the spacing of it, which provides for easy access from one to another. Of course, for some wildlife, you need corridors, and that's where riparian strips have a value in terms of that landscape dynamic and that landscape functionality. So yes, riparian stuff is great, but it often doesn't deliver because there's very narrow buffering. You need those corridors connecting larger patches. I hope that's clear now. Sorry, took me a while to get there.
No,
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
I've got some questions from Councillor Farm and then Councillor Pauling. Very quickly.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks so much for your submission. And
ooh, I've lost.
No,
You're
think
muted.
Councillor Lan, you're on mute.
oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Lovely. Sorry. Thanks for your submission, Colin, and thanks for your work in the space. I'll just be very brief with my question. I'm not sure if you were online earlier, Colin, when Fish and Game gave their presentation.
No, I wasn't.
Okay, well, they gave quite a strong presentation about us basically shifting our focus to the high country areas in terms of where biodiversity still remains. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts. I mean, you're a big advocate for the lowland, restoration and how important that is.
Yes.
What do you have any thoughts on that sort of lowland versus high country discussion and protection of what still remains versus regeneration?
Yes. Okay. So I think one of the key aspects of conservation is connecting people to nature. And the vast majority of people, as we know, live in cities and in the lowlands and on farms. And a small proportion of those people go out and enjoy the high country for all sorts of reasons. So in other words, if nature isn't around where people live and work and play, then it essentially doesn't exist. And there's a concept called extinction of experience. And that's what many New Zealanders, and especially in lowland Canterbury, have suffered, although it's being reversed now because we are getting a lot more restoration and native habitat created in our cities. But the same argument applies to the need for sanctuaries, which bring our charismatic endangered wildlife right into the hearts and minds and daily experience of our community, of where the majority of people live. If people have that extinction of experience and don't have any appreciation or connection to that nature, then they're not going to support its protection. And so it's vital to have nature where people are, as well as the quite different kind of nature that exists in the high country. By just preserving the high country, we only preserve one part of our total biodiversity. And so it's extremely important to protect nature and enhance and enrich nature down where people live. As I said, Canterbury is the only region in the country that doesn't have that sanctuary experience of those charismatic species. And we see the result in Wellington with Zealandia and Orokonui and Dunedin and other places. It actually generates a spirit of an emotional attachment and desire for more of it, and creating predator-free Wellington and predator-free Dunedin and the rest of it. So it has a very positive spin-off to the whole country's attitude, the whole citizenry's attitude to conservation, and also generating sort of ecological literacy amongst the public.
Thanks so much for that, Colin.
Now, I'm just conscious we are well over time now, but we had two more questions from Councillor Pauline, Councillor Clearwater, if they wanted to just finish those up to finish us up for this morning.
Kia ora, Megan. It's Craig here. Kia ora, Colin. Tēnā koe mō tō kōrero kia mātou I tēnei ata, so thanks for your submission and calling in. I just had a question too about the eco sanctuaries, and from the answer you gave to Lan there, it seems like that would be best to be had in the city. My question is, where may that be, and are there some workable sites and candidates right now? I've got lots of other questions too, but I think that'll do it.
Kia ora. Thank you. Yes, well, I've been involved with the promotion of one particular sanctuary proposal, the Waimakariri Eco Sanctuary, incorporating Travers Wetland and the adjacent red zone down to the Avon River, which would create a total area of around just under 200 hectares, which is about the same size as Zealandia, which seems to be like a minimal critical mass. Of course, Canterbury needs more than one sanctuary. I mean, Wellington's got about half a dozen within easy reach of its citizenry. Banks Peninsula is obviously another important candidate, and there's an important development proposal in the Whakaraupo, Littleton, and headwaters of Littleton Harbour proposal. Henawai, of course, could be another focal point. Eventually, there's a proposal actually for Christchurch to become the first national park city in New Zealand. And this is a thing. London declared itself a national park city a year ago. We should be following suit. We've got all of diversity here, and we can enhance it even further by having these sanctuaries, and they would be relatively, cheap new assets to develop in and around the city for our own people, but also for visitors. Kia ora.
Thanks, Colin.
Final question from Phil. Thank you.
Kia ora, Colin, and thank you for your presentation. And probably at a future time, it'd be really good to have that discussion about a futures advisory group. My questions really follow Craig's question. And in terms of the wetland conservation projects, earlier we were challenged by Di Lucas to really consider mitigation. And I just wondered if you would say that the wetland project as also being a form of mitigation against future sea level rise.
Yes, well, that's a huge big question, which with sea level rise, the need to consider property rights along coasts and so on, but the sooner we get on to a greener economy, sequestering carbon, and greening and regenerating farmland, the sooner we will get to sort of turn the corner, on the increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and the effect on climate change. So, all of these things are integrated. I'm not quite sure whether I sort of answered your question there, but yes, wetlands are important. And I guess one of my other main issues about wet environment is the importance of preserving our water races. Now, people often will think, these are just artificial things, but actually they're over 100 years old. They preserve now just about all of the last wetland habitat across vast tracts of the Canterbury Plains. And they incorporated the nature from the original natural wetlands, and so these should be preserved now as natural taonga, not as just some sort of artificial thing that we can sort of put into a pipe now. That's probably about as much I can say, other than a much longer discussion, maybe another time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin, and thank you everyone else as well for your patience this morning as we've tried to get through everybody and hear everyone's submissions, but really appreciate your patience as well, Colin, and you're taking the time out of your day to come and speak to us. It's been really valuable, so thank you.
Kia ora.
Megan, it's Louise. What I'll do, we've had a few changes for this afternoon's session, so after this meeting I'll send out a revised schedule for this afternoon, because two of the people that couldn't get in this morning, I've slotted them into the afternoon. So we'll be got now Tyrone is our last one at 3:30, so all going well, we'll be running from 1 o'clock till about 3:45.
Great, thank you very much for that, Louise, and thanks for working your way behind the scenes there with everybody. And thanks everyone for your patience this morning. It's been a bit challenging at my end, and I'm sure it's been challenging at your end as well, with lots of submitters with lots to say and lots of questions, and the technology thrown in there too. So thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Kia ora, Megan, did a good job. See you at 1 o'clock.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.